Hey everyone, welcome to Area 616. Well, after over 2 years of waiting and tons of hype, Season 3 of Marvel's best TV series, Daredevil, has finally arrived on Netflix. This season has been very highly anticipated due to its promise to not only give a rematch between Fisk and Daredevil, but to also seemingly return the Marvel Netflix series to the same level of quality that they had when they first debuted back in 2015. And having watched all of Season 3, I'd say they've done a fantastic job on all sides. This video will be in 2 parts, my spoiler-free review of the season as a whole, and then my spoilers discussion where I'll talk about the spoilery stuff from the season, and where I think those things could be leading. If you want to skip the review and get straight to the spoilers discussion, here's the time code for that. And before I get started, I just wanted to say that I am aware of what's happened with Luke Cage. For those who didn't know, Netflix decided to cancel Luke Cage after 2 seasons, only a week after canceling Iron Fist. I'm going to make a video on that. That'll be this coming Monday if everything goes according to plan. I have a lot to say in that department. But in any event, Daredevil. I really love Daredevil Season 3. There's honestly so much to talk about here. I barely even know where to start. The characters, acting, action, story, it's all top-notch. Charlie Cox gives his best performance yet as Matt Murdock, who's at the lowest point he's ever been. At the start of the season, Matt is seriously injured and barely able to do anything. He's lost Elektra, he's lost his powers, and he's lost his faith in God. All of this is portrayed incredibly well by Charlie Cox. But he also does an equally amazing job with the other side of Daredevil, the action scenes. He really nails these. There is one fight scene in particular, the big one-take fight everyone's talking about, that Daredevil goes through without a mask. Watching through it, you can tell when he swaps out with the stunt double if you know where to look, but he still pulls off a lot of the scene himself, and it's really impressive. Major props to not just Cox, but the entire stunt team who pulled this off. I mean, this whole sequence is truly amazing. It goes on for something like 11 minutes. It's really breathtaking. In Season 2, they tried to do another one-take fight with Daredevil fighting the Dogs of Hell, and while that fight was fun to watch, it was pretty obvious where the cuts were hidden and all of that. Here, though, I honestly never noticed a cut. If they were there, they were pretty well hidden. It's incredible work. The only way I think they could ever top this is if they did an entire episode in one take, or at least made it look like it was. Mr. Robot did something like that, actually. All of the fight scenes in this season are incredibly well done, especially with Bullseye, but I'll get more to him in a minute. But they did a really amazing job portraying him in the fight scenes in particular. But the rest of the cast does fantastic work here as well. One of the things I like the most about this season is what they've done with Karen Page and Foggy Nelson. It's easy for these 2 characters, especially Foggy, to get the short end of the stick on this show, but they both really have some great moments to shine. Foggy still doesn't have as much to do as Karen, but that's not to undersell him here. He's a great part of the season and does feel important. Unlike a lot of these Marvel Netflix shows, this season is filled with lots of subplots and all of that, but it never feels tedious or annoying or anything. For the most part, everything feels necessary and interesting in its own way. It's been long teased that Karen's backstory will be explored this season, and they do. There's an episode in the season that's basically entirely devoted to Karen and her upbringing, and it's a very good episode. Deborah Ann Woll gives a great performance, and it's all just as dark and raw as you expected it to be. But we also meet Foggy's family in the season, which proved to be an unexpected highlight. It was sort of like a light in the darkness, I guess you could say. Joanne Whalley plays Sister Maggie, a nun who helps nurse Matt back to health, both mentally and physically, alongside Father Lantom. She was a great addition to the cast. She gave a really good performance. I also really liked what they did with Lantom. He was in the season a lot more than I expected him to be, and I was glad he was. They did some pretty interesting stuff with him. Jay Ali plays FBI agent Ray Nadim, who is charged with keeping an eye on Fisk, who has gotten out of prison on a deal. I didn't know what to expect with him going into this season, but I was pleasantly surprised. He's a great character who Jay Ali does a stellar job bringing to life. One thing the new showrunner Eric Olesen has said is that he didn't want to treat anyone as a supporting character. He wanted everyone to be the hero of their own story, and that shows here. Pretty much everyone feels just as interesting as the last, although, of course, some stand out more than others. I think it goes without saying that Wilson Fisk is amazing in this season, but I'm going to say it anyway. Wilson Fisk is amazing this season. Once again, Vincent D'Onofrio gives an incredible performance, and he's also got a pretty interesting story going. He really feels like the Kingpin this season. It was very well done. But easily my favorite part of this season was Bullseye. Bullseye is insane, literally. I was expecting them to make him really sympathetic like Fisk or Kilgrave, and they do in a way, but he's still Bullseye. He's a complete psychopath, and every moment he was on screen I was on the edge of my seat. I was genuinely afraid for every character whenever they had to go up against Bullseye, because he's just so menacing. His fight with Daredevil in episode 6, which also happens to be my favorite episode of the season, is the most intense fight scene from any of these shows, and one of the most intense I've ever watched. What I love about Bullseye here is how precise he is. He feels like this unstoppable force, almost like the Punisher, but far more accurate and honestly scarier. He's unpredictable, and he may just top Fisk this season for me. Serious props to Wilson Bethel here. They did an amazing job with Bullseye. A lot of people might say the season was too slow-paced, and it's true. It doesn't really get going until maybe episode 3 or 4, but I was not bothered by that much at all. The performances from the cast and the drama they're working with kept me invested throughout all of it, even the slow moments. So the pacing never bothered me, but I could see it bothering some people. So after all of that is said, is it true what everyone says? Is Daredevil Season 3 better than Season 1? It's tough to say, really. I'd need to watch it again before I made a final judgment on that, but in a lot of ways I'd say that it is. It does so much so right, but there's also just something about Season 1 that was just perfect. It was kind of a lightning in a bottle scenario. It had the perfect story and characters, but regardless, Daredevil Season 3 is an amazing season of television and absolutely a return to form for the series. We are now entering the spoilers discussion, so if you haven't finished Season 3 yet, put this in your watch later and come back after you have. What I want to talk about here is how Season 3 ended and where I could see some of the plot threads leading in Season 4 and beyond, if we get a 4th season, that is. Unfortunately, it's not as guaranteed at the moment. In any event, the season ends on a surprisingly happy note considering how dark the preceding episodes are, with Ray Nadim's dying testimony serving as the silver bullet to bring Fisk down, and Daredevil finally coming out on top. Matt makes a deal with Fisk, saying that if he agrees to stay in prison and keep his mouth shut, he won't prove to the authorities that Vanessa ordered the death of Nadim, thereby giving her murder charges on top of the charges she already has for being an accessory. Honestly, it looks like this could be the thing to finally keep Fisk in prison, and it's hard to imagine how he might return unless Vanessa gets killed or perhaps betrays him, which is something that she has done in the comics in the past. During the three-way brawl between Fisk, Daredevil, and Bullseye, Fisk did end up seriously injuring Dex, shattering his spine against a brick wall. But at the end, he's seen in surgery getting it reinforced with some kind of steel by a doctor named Oyama. This actually happened in the comics in a very similar fashion, but what's really interesting is that they kept Oyama in this. And that's interesting because, ladies and gents, I think we have our first major X-Men plot thread in the MCU. In the comics, Oyama is a villain known as Lord Darkwind. Subtle, I know. In any event, he's a doctor who's known for perfecting the bonding process between a certain fictional metal known as adamantium and the human skeleton. Yep, that's right. He was responsible for Wolverine's metallic skeleton. Sort of. His notes on the process were stolen, so he didn't directly give Wolverine his skeleton, but he is responsible for perfecting the process. But on top of that, and fixing up Bullseye, he's also the father of Yuriko Oyama, aka Lady Deathstrike, a pretty major X-Men villain. Obviously, they couldn't call the metal adamantium here yet, but by the time Season 4 would come out, the Disney-Fox deal would be complete, so I wouldn't be surprised if the first spoken reference to adamantium is in Daredevil. I'm really interested to see where this goes. In the comics, he was the main antagonist of the storyline where Daredevil teamed up with Wolverine. I doubt that's what would happen here, but I imagine that Lord Darkwind might return to play a larger role in Season 4, alongside Bullseye, which I'm really excited about. But beyond this, with Fisk seemingly off the table for the foreseeable future, the possibilities for this show's future are seemingly endless. I'd like to see the series move away from the Kingpin for a bit and bring in some of Daredevil's other rogues gallery, because there are some cool characters here. A personal favorite of mine is Mr. Fear, a lawyer like Matt and Foggy who uses fear gas on his foes. I think he has the potential to be the main villain for a season, and his law school connections to Matt, and assumedly Foggy, would make him stand out from the other villains. I'd also love to see the return of Owl, but not Leland Owlsley necessarily. I could see his son coming to New York looking for answers on his father's death, perhaps, or maybe he just wants to take over himself. Black Tarantula would also be a cool addition, though I think he'd be more of a side villain. I'd also love to see Typhoid Mary come over from Iron Fist. Maybe her third Bloody Mary persona is more of a crime boss. In Season 3, there are some written references to the Magia, which I would love to see be followed up on. It's hard to imagine certain characters like Hammerhead and Count Nefaria in these types of shows, but I'd love to see them try if they're willing to. Tombstone is another character that I usually would want to be in Luke Cage, but, well, this one isn't necessarily a villain, but I'd love to see Echo be introduced. She's a really cool character. That is, unless Netflix decides to cancel Daredevil like the others. But as I'll talk about in my next video about all of these cancellations, if any of these shows are going to survive this, it's Daredevil. It's easily the most successful of all of them. So while I'm worried about this a bit, I'm also hopeful. But with that said, what do you guys think? What villains would you like to see in Daredevil Season 4 and beyond? And what did you think of Daredevil Season 3 as a whole? Did you think it was better than Season 1? Let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.